The glass conference room felt like a fishbowl. 23 investors stared at me as I finished my presentation. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice stayed steady. The numbers were clear. The strategy was solid. Everything Cedric had fumbled for the past hour, I just fixed in 10 minutes. "Brilliant analysis, Ms. Green," said the lead investor, nodding approvingly. "This is exactly what we needed to hear." I glanced at Cedric. His smile looked like it might crack his face. His fingers drummed against the mahogany table, a nervous tic I'd learned to recognize over the past 6 months. The other executives whispered among themselves, clearly impressed. "Thank you," I said quietly, gathering my notes. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to move forward. Cedric walked beside me to the elevator, silent. His jaw was tight. I knew that look. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:30 a.m. "Please report to HR immediately," the text read. My stomach dropped. I threw on my blazer and rushed to the office. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Patricia, the HR manager. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Gianna, we're placing you on a 2-week unpaid suspension." The words hit me like cold water. My name is Gianna Green. I've never been the type to speak over others or steal the spotlight. For 10 years, I believed good work spoke for itself. I kept my head down, delivered results, and trusted that effort would be rewarded. Until I met Cedric Coyle. I started at TechFlow Industries right out of college. It was a small software company then, maybe 50 employees total. I worked in operations, handling everything from client relations to project management. I wasn't flashy, but I was reliable. Over the years, I led 2 major hardware rollouts that saved the company millions. I trained half the operations department. I built relationships with our biggest clients. My reviews were always stellar. When the company grew to over 300 employees, I knew I was ready for the next step. Director of Operations had been my goal for years. My manager at the time, Helen, had even hinted it was mine when the position opened up. Then TechFlow hired Cedric as Senior Vice President. Everything changed. He was tall, confident, and had an MBA from a prestigious school. He wore expensive suits and spoke in buzzwords that made executives nod approvingly. Within his first week, he was already reshaping our department. I should have seen the warning signs then. The promotion announcement came on a Tuesday. I'd been working late again, fine-tuning the quarterly operations report. My phone pinged with an email from HR. "Congratulations to Michael Torres on his promotion to Director of Operations." My blood ran cold. Michael had been with the company for 3 years. Good guy, decent worker, but he'd never led a major project. He'd never dealt with difficult clients or managed a crisis. I walked to Cedric's office the next morning, my hands shaking slightly. "About the promotion," I started. Cedric looked up from his laptop, his expression neutral. "Ah, yes. Look, Gianna, you're valuable here, but you're not quite ready for that level of responsibility yet." "Not ready?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Leadership requires a certain presence. Michael has that executive presence we need." I left his office feeling hollow. That evening, I reviewed my files and found something that made my chest tight. A client presentation Cedric had delivered last month contained an entire slide I'd created. Word for word. My analysis, my recommendations, my work. But his name was on the title slide. The changes started subtly. I'd arrive at work to find colleagues avoiding eye contact. Invitations I'd always received stopped coming. Email threads that used to include me suddenly didn't. "Did you see the memo about the Johnson account?" I asked Sarah from marketing during our coffee break. "Oh," she said, looking uncomfortable. "I thought everyone got that." I hadn't. Cedric held weekly strategy meetings that I was no longer invited to. When I asked about it, he said, "We're keeping it to senior leadership for now." But Michael was there, and he reported to me. The passive-aggressive comments started next. "Some people think they know better than management," I overheard in the break room. Maybe if certain people focused more on their assigned tasks instead of trying to run everything. The isolation was deliberate. I could feel it in every interaction, every excluded email, every meeting that happened without me. Then came the emergency on the Morrison project. A major client deliverable was failing, and panic had set in. I wasn't supposed to know about the crisis meeting, but I overheard it from the hallway. I knocked on the conference room door. I think I can help, I said, stepping into the room full of stressed executives. Cedric's face tightened. Gianna, this doesn't concern your department. Actually, it does. I handled the Morrison integration last year. I know exactly what's happening. For the next hour, I walked them through the solution. It was a database conflict I'd seen before. Simple fix, but you had to know where to look. The crisis was averted. Everyone seemed relieved. The next morning, Cedric presented the solution to upper management. I listened from my desk as his voice carried from the conference room next door. The fix just came to me last night. Sometimes you have to step back and see the bigger picture. My hands clenched into fists. That was my solution. My analysis. My work. But there was Cedric, taking credit with the same confidence he wore his expensive ties. 2 days later, an email went out announcing a major investor meeting. TechFlow was seeking Series B funding, and this presentation would make or break our future. Senior leadership will be presenting, the email read. My name wasn't on the list. I stared at my screen, feeling something harden in my chest. The night before the investor meeting, I stayed late at the office. The building was quiet except for the hum of computers and distant traffic. I opened a blank presentation and began working. I told myself I was just preparing. Just in case. Cedric was a strong presenter, but he didn't know the operational details like I did. If questions came up about implementation, capacity, or scalability, he might need backup. At least that's what I told myself. I worked until midnight, crafting slides that told the real story of our company's growth, not the polished marketing version, but the actual numbers. The real challenges we'd overcome, the systems that actually drove our success. As I was packing up, I saw Cedric leaving the building. He carried a USB drive and a folder. I couldn't see much in the dim parking lot lighting, but something on the folder caught my eye. My name was printed on the tab. I sat in my car for 10 minutes after he drove away, staring at the empty parking lot. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Why would he have a folder with my name on it? I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing. Tomorrow would change everything. I could feel it. The investor meeting started at 9 sharp. 23 potential investors filled our largest conference room. I sat in the back, notebook ready, officially there to provide operational support if needed. Cedric stood at the front, confident as always. His presentation started strong. Company, overview, market opportunity, competitive advantages. But then he got to the operational metrics. Our Q2 growth was driven by streamlined processes, he said, clicking to a slide I'd never seen before. The numbers were wrong. Not slightly off, completely wrong. This doesn't align with your Q2 numbers, whispered one investor to another. Cedric kept talking, but I could see confusion spreading across the room. He was using outdated data, mixing up quarterly projections, and making claims that our actual performance couldn't support. Excuse me, said the lead investor, a sharp woman in a navy suit. Can you clarify the operational capacity numbers? They seem inconsistent with your earlier slides. Cedric paused. His confidence faltered for just a moment. Of course, well, the capacity, we've optimized. He was floundering. I felt something inside me snap. I stood up. May I clarify those numbers? The room turned to look at me. Cedric's face went pale. For the next 15 minutes, I spoke clearly and calmly. I corrected the capacity numbers, explained our actual Q2 performance, and outlined realistic projections based on our current systems. The investors leaned forward, taking notes. Questions flew, and I answered each one with specific examples and concrete data. Now this makes sense, said the lead investor. Thank you for the clarification. When I finished, the room applauded. Not polite golf claps, but genuine appreciation for getting real answers. Cedric managed a tight smile. Thank you, Gianna. Always helpful to have operational input. The ride back to the office was silent. Cedric stared out the window, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. That afternoon felt normal. I caught up on emails, reviewed project updates, even grabbed lunch with a colleague who seemed warmer than usual. But the next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:30 a.m. Please report to HR immediately. Patricia, the HR manager, sat across from me with a folder open. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Gianna, we've received a complaint about your conduct yesterday. Due to insubordination and undermining executive leadership, we're placing you on a 2-week unpaid suspension. When I returned to my desk to gather my things, there was a yellow sticky note on my monitor. Should have kept quiet. I drove home in a daze. 2 weeks without pay. In my 10 years at TechFlow, I'd never even been written up. My performance reviews were spotless. I'd saved projects, trained colleagues, and built relationships that kept our biggest clients happy. And now I was suspended for doing my job too well. I sat in my apartment that afternoon, staring at the wall. The humiliation burned in my chest. The unfairness of it all felt like a weight pressing down on me. I cried. Angry tears, frustrated tears, heartbroken tears. 10 years of loyalty, and this was how it ended. But slowly, as the tears dried, something else emerged. Clarity. No one's coming to save me, I whispered to my empty living room. I'd been waiting for fairness, for recognition, for someone in leadership to notice what was happening. But fairness wasn't coming. Recognition had been stolen, and leadership was the problem. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I created a new document and typed a title, Timeline of Events, Cedric Coyle Misconduct. It was time to save myself. I spent the next 3 days building my case. Every email I'd ever sent to Cedric, every project I'd completed, every meeting where my ideas had been presented as his. The evidence was overwhelming once I laid it out chronologically. The Morrison Project solution, the capacity analysis he'd used in presentations, the client relationship strategies that had increased retention by 15%. All my work, all credited to him. But the smoking gun was the presentation slide from 2 months ago. I'd created it for a client pitch, complete with proprietary analysis and recommendations. Cedric had used it in his deck without attribution. I had the original file, time-stamped and saved in my personal drive. I organized everything into a clean, professional document. Dates, times, witnesses, evidence, 43 pages of systematic credit theft and workplace misconduct. Then I called my friend Marcus, who worked as an employment lawyer downtown. I need advice on how to protect myself professionally, I said. What kind of situation are we talking about? I gave him the overview. He was quiet for a long moment. Gianna, you need to document everything. Every interaction, every email, every incident, and you need to be prepared for retaliation. What kind of retaliation? They'll try to discredit you. Make you look incompetent or difficult. Classic playbook. I looked at my 43-page document. I'm already ahead of you. Returning to work after suspension felt like walking into a freezer. Colleagues who used to chat with me in the hallway now gave polite nods and kept walking. The energy around my desk felt toxic. Cedric was louder than before. His voice carried more authority, more confidence. It was like my absence had given him permission to fully claim the space I'd occupied. But something had changed in me too. I walked taller, spoke when I had something valuable to add, smiled politely at the cold shoulders and whispered comments. I wasn't the same person who'd left 2 weeks ago. During my first week back, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Cedric was preparing for the quarterly board presentation, and his slides included our product launch timeline. Last month, I'd caught a critical flaw in the beta version, a database integration error that would cause system crashes under heavy load. I'd flagged it immediately, sending detailed documentation to Cedric and the development team. The error was still in the timeline. They were planning to launch with the flaw intact. I pulled up my sent emails. There it was. My warning, sent directly to Cedric with a red priority flag. His response, "Thanks, we've got it under control." He hadn't even read it. I sent another email, more detailed this time. I outlined exactly what would happen if we launched with the integration error. System crashes, data loss, potential security vulnerabilities. Cedric's response came within an hour. "Thanks, we've got it under control." Copy and paste. He literally sent me the same response. I forwarded the exchange to the development team lead, hoping someone would catch the issue. But 30 minutes later, a message popped up in a Slack channel I wasn't supposed to see. My phone had automatically logged me into the wrong workspace. "She's trying to sabotage again. Can't let go of being excluded from the project." The message was from Michael, my former subordinate turned peer. 3 people had liked it. I screenshot the message and added it to my growing file. If they wanted to paint me as a saboteur for trying to prevent a disaster, that said more about them than it did about me. I spent the rest of the afternoon updating my resume, just in case. That evening, as I was cooking dinner, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Is this Gianna Green? The voice was professional, crisp. Yes, who's calling? My name is Amanda Foster. I'm CEO of Innovate Tech Solutions. I was at your investor presentation last week. My fork clattered against my plate. Innovate Tech was TechFlow's biggest competitor. Amanda, Foster was legendary in our industry. Built 3 successful companies from the ground up. I'd like to offer you a position as head of operations. Your presentation was exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. I was quiet for so long, she asked if I was still there. Yes, I'm here. I'm just surprised. Don't be. You clearly understand operational excellence in a way your leadership doesn't appreciate. We'd like to change that. She outlined an offer that was 40% higher than my current salary, plus equity and a signing bonus. It was more money than I'd ever imagined making. I need time to think, I said. Of course. Take a week. But Gianna, don't wait too long. Talent like yours doesn't stay available forever. After she hung up, I sat staring at my half-eaten dinner. Everything was about to change. The next morning, I walked into work with a strange sense of calm. Nothing looked different. Same cubicles, same coffee machine, same fluorescent lights, but everything felt different. I had options now. Around noon, Cedric appeared at my desk. His expression was stormy. I heard you were contacted by a client directly yesterday. The Peterson Group? I nodded. They had questions about their Q3 implementation timeline. You should have directed them to me immediately. That's protocol. I told them to contact your office for scheduling. I just clarified a technical question they had. His face reddened. Gianna, you need to understand your role here. You're not client-facing anymore. You don't make decisions above your pay grade. Several colleagues had stopped working to listen. The conversation was loud enough to carry across the open office. I understand my role perfectly, I said quietly. Good, because frankly, you're not as smart as you think you are. The words hung in front of me like a slap. Around us, the office had gone completely silent. I stood up slowly, meeting his eyes. Neither are you, Cedric. His mouth opened, then closed. He turned and walked away without another word. My phone buzzed with a text. Amanda Foster calling in 5 minutes. Amanda's voice was warm but direct. I hope you've had time to consider our offer. I have, and I'm very interested, but I need 4 weeks before I can start. That's longer than usual. May I ask why? I looked around the office, watching Cedric pace in his glass-walled office like a caged animal. I have some loose ends to tie up, projects that need proper documentation. I don't want to leave anyone in a difficult position. It wasn't entirely true. My real reason was simpler. I wanted to see how this played out. Call it professional curiosity or maybe a desire for closure. I respect that. 4 weeks it is. We'll send over the paperwork today. After we hung up, I opened my calendar and marked the date. 4 weeks from today, I'd be gone. But I wouldn't just be leaving. I'd be watching TechFlow learn exactly how much my outdated mindset had been holding things together. I started working on transition documents that afternoon. Detailed, thorough documentation of every process, every client relationship, every system I'd built over the past decade. If they thought I was replaceable, they were about to find out exactly what they were replacing. The next 4 weeks were the strangest of my career. I came in, did exactly what was required of me, and nothing more. No staying late to fix problems. No jumping in to help struggling colleagues. No volunteering for extra projects. For the first time in 10 years, I worked exactly 8 hours a day. Cedric became increasingly erratic. He missed deadlines I'd always helped him meet. He scheduled meetings without checking key stakeholders' availability. He made promises to clients without understanding our actual capacity. "Where's the quarterly capacity report?" he asked me during our second week. "You said you'd handle quarterly reporting going forward." His face went pale. The report was due to the board in 3 days, and he'd never compiled one before. He spent the weekend in the office, struggling through analysis that usually took me half a day. Meanwhile, I was getting emails, clients asking for me specifically. Investors from the presentation wanting follow-up information. Other companies reaching out about opportunities. My phone buzzed constantly with LinkedIn notifications. My professional network was suddenly very interested in what I was doing next. but the most telling sign was when Patricia from HR asked to meet. "We need to discuss the Peterson Group situation," Patricia said, her voice careful. I raised an eyebrows. "What situation?" "They sent a formal complaint about communication breakdown on their Q3 project. They specifically mentioned that you were the only person who understood their requirements." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "They're threatening to terminate their contract if they don't get better support. The Peterson Group was worth $2.3 million annually. Losing them would be devastating." "What would you like me to do?" I asked. "Could you possibly reach out, just to smooth things over?" I thought about it for a moment. "I'll draft an email introducing them to the right people in Michael's team. Professional transition." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you." But as I walked back to my desk, I knew it was too late. The Peterson Group had already made their decision. My email would be polite and professional, but it wouldn't change their minds. They'd been asking for me for months. Now they'd learned I was leaving. 2 days later, the email came. "Notice of contract termination, Peterson Group." Cedric's voice echoed from his office. "How did this happen?" The Peterson Group termination was just the beginning. Within a week, 2 more clients had expressed concerns about service continuity. Both mentioned me by name in their feedback. Meanwhile, the product launch was approaching. The same launch with the critical flaw I'd flagged months ago. I'd done my part. I documented the issue, set multiple warnings, and escalated to the appropriate people. What happened next wasn't my responsibility, but I still felt sick knowing what was coming. The beta launch happened on a Thursday. For the first few hours, everything seemed fine. Light user load, controlled testing environment. Then they opened it to the broader user base. The first crash happened at 2:47 p.m. I was at my desk when the development team's Slack channel exploded with panicked messages. Database timeout errors, system not responding, complete failure under load. I watched the chaos unfold, remembering my detailed email from months ago. The exact scenarios I'd predicted were playing out in real time. My phone buzzed with a direct message from Tom, the lead developer. "Didn't you warn about this exact issue?" I screenshotted his message and added it to my file. By Friday morning, the crisis had escalated. 3 major clients were reporting system failures. The Peterson Group sent a public statement about their decision to partner with more reliable technology providers. Industry blogs were picking up the story. TechFlow's troubled launch raises questions about internal oversight. I was called into Patricia's office again, but this time the tone was different. "Gianna, we need to ask about your previous warnings regarding the product launch." I handed her a printed copy of my email chain. Every warning, every escalation, every ignored recommendation. She read through it silently, her expression growing more troubled with each page. "This is very thorough documentation. I try to be professional in my communications." "Yes, you do." She closed the folder. "Thank you for providing this information." That afternoon, I received an anonymous email from a generic account. "He's in trouble. Board meeting Monday." I didn't reply, but I saved the message. My last 2 weeks were almost up. Innovate Tech had been sending me onboarding materials, and my excitement was building. New challenges, supportive leadership, and the chance to build something without constantly looking over my shoulder. But I wasn't quite done at TechFlow yet. Monday's board meeting was closed door, but word spread quickly through the office. Cedric was called in twice. Michael was questioned about project timelines. The development team lead spent 3 hours in the conference room. I wasn't involved, but my documentation was. Patricia had apparently shared my warnings with the board, along with timestamps showing exactly when I'd flagged the critical issues. By Tuesday, everyone knew something big was happening. Cedric's office door stayed closed. Michael looked stressed and avoided eye contact. Wednesday brought the first concrete change. Cedric was asked to provide detailed documentation of all major project deliverables from the past 6 months. The same deliverables I'd actually completed. I watched him scramble through files trying to piece together work he'd never done. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Thursday was my second to last day. I spent it finishing my transition documents and organizing my files for whoever would take over my responsibilities, if anyone ever did. That evening, I cleaned out my desk drawers and packed up my personal items. 10 years of accumulated belongings fit into 2 small boxes. As I was leaving, Patricia caught me by the elevator. "Your exit interview is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I nodded. "I'll be there." "Gianna, off the record, it's finally happening." My exit interview was surprisingly pleasant. Patricia asked about my experience, my recommendations for improvement, and my thoughts on department morale. I was honest but diplomatic. No burning bridges, no angry accusations, just professional observations about communication, recognition, and leadership development opportunities. "Is there anything that might have changed your decision to leave?" I thought about it seriously. Different leadership might have made a difference, but honestly, this opportunity is exactly what I'm looking for at this stage of my career. When I walked out of TechFlow for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in months. That weekend, I got a call from Marcus, my lawyer friend. "You might want to check the business news Monday morning." "Why?" "Let's just say your former employer is having what you might call a reckoning." Monday morning, I was sipping coffee in my new office at Innovate Tech when the news alert popped up on my phone. TechFlow SVP placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. I didn't smile. I just exhaled slowly and got back to work. The next few weeks brought a steady stream of updates about TechFlow's situation. News traveled fast in our industry, and I had plenty of former colleagues who kept me informed. 2 major clients terminated their contracts, citing reliability concerns and communication breakdowns. The Peterson Group went public with their reasons for leaving, specifically mentioning the lack of operational expertise in current leadership. Cedric was officially suspended, pending a full investigation into project management and client relations. Michael was struggling to handle the workload that used to be split between him and me. 3 people had already quit from our old department. The stock price dropped 15% over 2 weeks. Industry watchdog sites started speculating about internal sabotage versus simple incompetence. Headlines like "TechFlow's Fall, When Talent Management Goes Wrong" began appearing in trade publications. I read them over lunch breaks, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I genuinely cared about TechFlow once. It had been my professional home for a decade, but I was building something new now. Innovate Tech's culture was everything TechFlow's wasn't. Collaborative, respectful, focused on results rather than politics. My new team actually listened when I spoke. They asked follow-up questions. They implemented my suggestions and gave me credit for successes. It was revolutionary. 3 months into my new role, the final news broke about TechFlow. Cedric Coyle was officially terminated for performance issues and violations of company policy. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of taking credit for subordinates' work and misrepresenting company capabilities to clients. Michael was demoted back to his previous role. The operations department was restructured under new leadership. TechFlow's valuation had dropped by nearly 30%. Several investors from that infamous presentation had withdrawn their funding commitments. Meanwhile, I was thriving at Innovate Tech. My operational strategies had helped us land 2 major new clients, including one that had left TechFlow. The irony wasn't lost on me. Amanda Foster called me into her office one afternoon for my quarterly review. "Gianna, I want you to know that hiring you was one of the best decisions we've made this year. Your strategic thinking and operational expertise have been invaluable. Thank you. I appreciate having leadership that values those contributions." "I'm curious, do you ever regret leaving TechFlow when you did?" I thought about it for a moment. "No, sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to bet on yourself." She smiled. Wise words. Keep up the excellent work. 6 months later, I was attending the Regional Tech Leadership Conference when a journalist approached me during the networking reception. "Miss Green, I'm writing a piece about workplace dynamics in tech. Could I get a quote from you?" "What's the angle?" "It's called The Woman Who Saved the Deal. It's about professionals who've overcome internal obstacles to achieve success." I sipped my wine, considering. A year ago, I would have declined. I didn't seek attention or recognition. But maybe my story could help other people in similar situations. "What would you like to know?" "How do you handle workplace situations where your contributions aren't recognized?" I thought about my answer carefully. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And remember that your value isn't determined by people who can't see it. Any advice for people facing similar challenges? Know your worth, protect your work, and don't wait for permission to advocate for yourself. The article came out 2 weeks later. It featured my story alongside several other professionals who'd overcome workplace obstacles. The response was overwhelming. Emails from people sharing their own experiences, LinkedIn messages from industry professionals, and speaking requests from professional organizations. I was amazed how many people had similar stories. 1 year after leaving TechFlow, I was named to the top 40 under 40 visionary leaders in the Tech Operations list. The recognition came with a profile interview and a photo shoot that made me laugh. Me, on the cover of a magazine. The interviewer asked about my leadership philosophy. Some people lead with noise and self-promotion. I prefer to lead with results and integrity. What advice would you give to young professionals starting their careers? Your reputation is built through consistent excellence, not through taking credit for other people's work. Focus on being valuable, not just visible. Any regrets about how things ended at your previous company? I paused, thinking about Cedric, about the colleagues who'd participated in isolating me, about the opportunities I'd lost. No regrets. Sometimes you have to be pushed out of your comfort zone to realize what you're truly capable of. The magazine hit newsstands the same week that TechFlow announced another round of layoffs. The company had never fully recovered from the operational disruption that followed my departure. But I wasn't focused on their struggles anymore. I was building something better. That evening, I updated my LinkedIn status, grateful for challenges that reveal opportunities. Within hours, it had dozens of comments from colleagues, clients, and complete strangers who shared their own stories of overcoming workplace adversity. Sometimes the best victory isn't proving your enemies wrong. It's proving yourself right.